Welcome, and this is a great turnout for our first Research-Intensive Programs in Physical Therapy, or RIPPT, seminar that we plan to have a monthly seminar after combined sections. We figured we would have too much competition, but we wanted to get this started in January, so we anticipate the next one will be in March. If you are interested, we would love to have you volunteer to be a person who would be a presenter in this. And so you can contact me or someone like Carol Tucker, who is going to be the moderator tonight, or David Brown, with an idea for a RIPPT seminar. But our goal is to create a nationwide network of connection. And we're really wanting to, in particular, help our junior faculty, postdocs, PhD students to feel supported and find mechanisms to work through this challenging time and create a supportive network of physical therapists and rehabilitation interested researchers during this time, and use this mechanism perhaps to go well beyond the pandemic as a special mechanism to go forward with. So I am Debbie Givens. I am the chair of RIPPT, and I am happy to welcome you and turn this over to Carol Tucker.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Interesting to hear about the snow and all the weird weather we're having, so welcome. As Debbie had mentioned, as most people came in, your videos are turned off, mainly to save bandwidth. And this is our kind of inaugural session, and the work group had decided that we would present lessons learned in New Horizons, that we would really first leverage some of our collective experiences and share with you. So the format today, and I should also admit to, I am co-moderating with Dave Brown, who's sitting on that side of me in our Hollywood Squares here tonight. And David will do more of the closing. But what we're gonna do is have three pairs of chair directors and faculty members kind of address 2 or 3 questions that were put out in the call, so to speak, or the announcement. And they're each going to take about 10 minutes, and that will give us a good 30 minutes for some live dialogue and question and answers. In addition to that, Stacy Fritz is going to be monitoring the chat. So if you want to open up your chat box so that you can keep an eye on some of the questions or maybe some of the key comments that are coming up, and then we will address all of the questions that are in the chat after each pair of speakers have had a chance to talk. So I'm going to pass on the baton to our group from University of Miami, Neva Kirk-Sanchez and Joyce Gomez-Osman.
Thank you. I'm Neva Kirk-Sanchez. I'm the department chair at the University of Miami. And I'm here speaking with Dr. Joyce Gomez-Osman. I have no idea where she might be on the screen, but who is assistant professor at the University of Miami and has been there. I'm gonna let her tell you about her history and the years that she's done what a little bit is, she talks about what has helped her be successful earlier in her career. But the first thing really we were asked to talk about is some strategies that we have used to help to build a robust research enterprise, including really nurturing young faculty and young researchers. And I've been in the role that I've been in, it's been about 6 years now, and we really have increased a great deal, both the amount of research funding we're bringing in and the number of faculty that are bringing in that funding, particularly junior faculty. And so I really believe that one of the reasons that we've been successful in doing this is because we've been able to really utilize our placement in the university as a clinical department in the medical school. And that's been really important because we're a little bit of an outlier. And it's enabled us, because we're not really measured with the same metrics as some of the other departments, the medical and surgical departments in the medical school, we've been able to create our own metrics, and we've been able to create our own expectations for our faculty, that really has enabled us to free up some time for junior faculty to develop, who really want to develop their research enterprise. That's been really critical for me. So I've been able to maintain some autonomy with funding, and again, set expectations for teaching load and research load that are very specific to the physical therapy department. And that really has allowed us to thrive. And so Joyce is a really good example of how we've been able to really take advantage of that autonomy that has been allowed to us. And again, it's enabled people who want to develop a research agenda to do that, but also people who want to develop teaching agendas and other kinds of things to do that as well. The other thing that's been really fortunate, I think, that we've been able to do, we have a very junior faculty. We have many more people who need to be mentored than we have people to mentor them. And so we've been able to really match junior faculty up with mentors in other departments. And Joyce is going to sort of describe how that's worked for her. We have a CTSI that is very heavily run by the Department of Neurology, and they've really been helpful and supportive for Joyce, and enabled us to build a very strong relationship with that department as well. So that's been a really good advantage for us. So I'm going to turn it over to Joyce so she can talk a bit about the way that has looked for her. And then if we have some time at the end, I'll talk a little bit more about some things that, some strategies that we've used to find the funds. So Joyce, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this invitation. It's an incredible honor for me to be here speaking amongst this distinguished group of people. I have been asked to talk a little bit about the most important things that I've done to successfully develop my research program with the support of my department chair. And there are many things, and it's really hard to keep it within, you know, a few minutes here and there, but I have some thoughts for you. So I have been, my current research is currently focused now on better understanding the mechanisms that underlie the ways by which exercise can promote cognitive health in different populations, specific project in aging. But I had previously trained with Dr. Delfield Fote, utilizing neuromodulation in spinal cord injury. And so for me, there are a few things, right? In my PhD, I took a little bit of a different turn, and that's not uncommon for many junior faculty. And so I think that the first point that I want to touch on is a postdoc, the importance of a postdoc. And so that was really critical for me because as I see it, the PhD studies are really part of your mentor's agenda. But the postdoc is where you take the direction of where you're going to go. And I think it's really important for you to do that. You know, we have, it's a different landscape being a physical therapist pursuing a PhD. Many people are very interested in getting right there in the classroom and doing those things, but stopping a little bit to reformulate and kind of figure out who you're going to be when you grow up is really, really important. I think the second topic that's really important is mentorship. And so mentorship, nothing can be done without mentorship. And mentorship is really hard to find. And so in our department, because of these interests of what I tell you that I have, we didn't really have immediately mentors within our department, but I was able to go out into other departments, neurology, psychiatry, and that takes time. The fact that my chair has decreased my teaching load and allows me to go and sit in meetings here and there and network is really, really critical. One of the things I want to say about mentorship is that, as Neva said, I was able to get a grant from our Clinical Translational Science Institute, and that's another really important part of my little 5 topics here. But an anecdote that I'll tell you from that experience is that the NIH, like the NCATS, who governs all of the CTSIs, they actually came to our university to assess it and see how it was doing. And I had a nice conversation with one of those people, and they said that they have metrics to see, like to really get down to what makes junior faculty successful. And they found that the winning combination is for you to have 2 types of mentors. The mentor that's kind of like that emeritus person, the person that doesn't need the papers anymore. And that even if you're reading your specific aims from afar, they'll be able to get the gist and see if it's a yay or a nay. But the second mentor that's really important is actually that person that just got the R01 approved. And so those two are because that person is going to look at the little things and check all of your, language and make sure that you're going in the right track. So I wanted to share that with anyone in case it was helpful. The second thing was an opportunity, a first grant. And I think that the way that we did it was with an internal award within the university. And that internal award was so important because it got me to my next topic, which is training. And the training that I received at the Tiger workshop was really pivotal. And it was important because sometimes as junior faculty, it's hard for us to see, the whole like NIH or the I don't know, DOD or those things. It looks like it's such a convoluted process that can be hard to navigate. And so Tiger was fantastic. I mean, obviously, and it was one of the things that was most critical for me that I thought was, I had Carolee Weinstein and Steve Wolf, and that I stopped to think like, oh my God, they're someone's mentor in their institution. Like they're a few doors away from one junior faculty. I don't have them here, but I need to find my own within my institution. And when I went back from Tiger, it was with the fire. And from Tiger, it was the KL2 from the CTSI. So if you're around a place that has a CTSI and they have a KL2, that's a perfect mechanism because it's a small grant, it's manageable. It's good for the mentors to be your mentors because it's good for them. It counts for their own career. It helps you. Once you are someone's mentor, these people are busy, but you make time for them. They have to see you and you go and you bug them and you see them with the meetings and stuff like that. Don't be afraid to bother people because they are always going to be busy. And the CTSI not only does that, they have their own pilot funding. In my specific case, I'm interested in aging adults. And so they're able to help me connect with them within the community. They were able to help me convert my study, which was an exercise study that was in person, to a fully remote intervention. And so being able to learn how to navigate, virtual informed consent and virtual paying and virtual everything. And so I think that probably my time is going to be up, but if I am to sum it up, it's going to be, postdoc, it's going to be mentorship, that first opportunity, Tiger, everyone needs to do Tiger, and a career development grant, such as a KL2. Thank you.
You're muted.
Thank you, Joyce. Yeah, Joyce has really been a great illustration of some networking within the university to make sure, because we didn't have it within our department, we didn't have the resources we needed, we were able to network for her. So what I didn't mention was Joyce completed her PhD with us, and we would have loved for her to stay on because she was a talented teacher and a talented researcher, but we did let her go. She went to do her postdoc hoping that she would come back, and when she did, that really was a fantastic thing for us. So that postdoc is really important. So our time is probably up. I'm going to turn it over to Mary Shaw. I have a few more things I could talk about, perhaps if it comes up in the chat, but I'm going to turn it over, I think, to Mary Shaw now.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Neva. And thank you for those comments. I'm Mary Shaw, and I've been chair here for about the past 7 years. And well, research has been a part of MCV VCU since the 40s. So the culture has already been there for 80 years. And in our department, everyone contributes scholarship and everyone does some teaching. I believe one supports the other, but the proportions are different according to the needs of the department and the strengths of the faculty. So when we're talking about a thriving research enterprise, I think it's important that you have faculty who are interested and dedicated to the research enterprise. And you as the chair can facilitate that culture when new faculty come on and actually expand the research capacity. So first, I believe you need the environment, you need the research space. That depends on the needs of the individual and the availability. So those of you that have been to VCU know that we spent about 20 years in the basement of West Hospital, which wasn't the best to be able to have the optimism to look out and see if it's snowing, but that's where we were. And so when Ben came on, and we had to modify old space, we've been fortunate in the past couple of years to move to a new building that was actually built for our college, where the College of Health Professions. And we took over the whole 4th floor. So that was wonderful. We could design what we wanted and find space that was appropriate for each of our major researchers. But the space can also be negotiated with collaborators if you don't have that space, or in spaces that are closer to the research subjects, as you might hear from Ben. The second item when considering your new faculty is the equipment, and I consider that the easiest and the hardest. They know what they want and what they need for the research, but what can the budget handle? You might have to look at what is already available and if there are collaborators, like Neva was talking about. And then, of course, you need time release from some teaching initially as the new faculty write grants and gather the data that will maintain their ability to focus on research. So I still think it's important to have some teaching in there, because it's important that the students see what is being researched, how you are solving problems, and that's an exciting part of being faculty. And we can try to facilitate new faculty out of our DPT programs. But that's the bottom line. We still need to continue to encourage our new faculty researchers to become what they want to be. And we can try to get more research resources for statisticians, research coordinators from the Office of Research and Innovation, or look at other places within our college or across the university. So I want to pass it along to Ben Darter, who has been one of our junior faculty and now is associate professor.
Yeah, pleasure to be a part of this. And I've been at VCU for almost, it'll be 10 years this November. So I guess I still call myself junior compared to some other people who are around the department. But, you know, I also kind of view my participation here a little bit almost like a scientific panel, where I'm just going to try to add in, because so much of what was already said about the junior faculty experience, I could really echo. And so, you know, I'll talk about a couple of things and try to, you know, not be too redundant here. But, you know, Dr. Shaw did mention the space limitations that were first presented. So I guess the first pearl I would say to junior faculty is have an enormous amount of patience. Sometimes you want to get right in and really hit the ground running 100 miles an hour, and there can be so many reasons why you won't do that, and space can be one of the big ones. And you know, I was very fortunate that my background in working with the military service members and veterans prior to coming to VCU made for a logical partnership with the VA, and I was able to you know, beg, borrow, and plead into some space there, and so I have a lab there, as well as a bright new shiny lab in our new building. So I'm blessed with riches. But again, a little bit of patience. It took a couple of years, and I kind of had to cobble together. I had to work on some projects that took places in other labs and other states, even just to try to keep some things going until it would kind of fall in place at VCU. So definitely patience is a pearl I would suggest young faculty have. You know, mentorship was already brought up, and that's actually, you know, absolutely critical. I'd actually add to what was already said in saying that, to me, the critical element was finding mentors who are both experts in what I was trying to do, but also, maybe more importantly for me as a young person, was a professional mentor, somebody who could tell me and give me some roadmaps for my career. And there's some people on this call who were at VCU at one time or another who have been instrumental in helping me sort of understand, okay, this is the path I need to be on. You know, what is it like to be on the tenure track? What does that mean I have to do in 3 years or 5 years or 7 years or 20 years? You know, what is full professor again? Why do I want to be that someday? You know, all of those things that you may not ever get. You know, there's something to be said for really a professional mentor or mentors to really kind of help you set up that roadmap for your career, and then just to be there to commiserate with, to celebrate with, to be able to text and say, hey, you know, that grant that I didn't think I was going to get, well, I got it. You know, something like that. You know, those are always kind of those people to fall back on that I think are real instrumental to having a successful career. And then, of course, funding is always a big elephant in the room. And what I would say to that is, you know, one of the lessons I think I've learned is that, especially early on, the best way to get going for me was to be a good collaborator and be a co-investigator. Don't focus so hard on just trying to hit the big one and be a PI right off the jump. That you sometimes you need to, do the best you can to be a good helper to somebody else, to take a part in their project, to get a track record, to build your network, and start little with your own work and build it up so that you can be successful over time. But don't fool yourself, or at least I don't fool myself into thinking, okay, day one, I'm going to walk in the door, put out a major, multi-million-dollar proposal and get it, because it probably is even with a postdoc, that's a heavy lift for a lot of people. So start small, be a good collaborator, build your networks, and then make sure you apply to the right places. Start small and take advantage of the same internal awards that were already mentioned. I'm sure all institutions have training awards and small, pilot work awards. Use those to leverage into those bigger studies.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Ben. And I think, as Neva and as everybody has talked about, those mentors are important. I think one of the things that they can also help with is focusing. And Ben's been terrific about focusing his research. Other folks are not so good. They get carried away. Oh, here's a distractor. And your mentor is there to help you maintain that focus and what you were interested in. Sometimes you do have to go with what gets funded, but nevertheless, it's important to keep that focus and eye on the dream that's ahead. So next, I'm going to pass it off to Jules and let you take over.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mary. So I'm going to share my screen with you. So I'm Jules Dewalt. I'm the chair of physical therapy, human movement sciences. Like Neva's case, I'm actually in the medical school, the Department of Medical School. And let me see, make sure that this starts happening. You see only one thing, everything looks fine. All right. So basically, we're the oldest PT department. Started our first year, graduated in 1928, and didn't even know PT existed in those days, but apparently it did. We were starting, actually, in our places, the APTA started to have their first office, is what I just learned because of the 100-year APTA anniversary coming up. So a quick overview of the things that my colleagues have talked about as well. I want to talk about important ingredients necessary to grow research enterprise. And based on our experience, we'll briefly talk a bit about what turned out to be the most effective way to grow our research portfolio, and then talk about the resources that are necessary to build a research enterprise. And I became chair about 14 years ago, and here you see kind of our research direct income from 2010 till now. We're approaching about 10 million, and I started with a bit over $1 million when I became chair 14 years ago. So you see a nice trajectory up, and I think the question then is, well, this is nice, but what does it take to do this? And so some of my colleagues already mentioned this: protected research time for faculty on tenure eligible, but I also push a lot of protected time for my non-tenure eligible clinical educator tracks, as we call them at Northwestern. Make sure that they have a minimum now of about 2 days a week that they can do research. Already, many of you mentioned it, mentoring is crucial. Without mentoring, it's really a difficult route. And as you heard already, it's not only mentoring from a research perspective, but from a career perspective as well. Hiring research-minded faculty with research experience and interests, I think, is important, and providing them with the right startups. You need to give them the money they need to succeed. Okay, that means money and also space, as I'll talk about in a moment. Another thing that my colleagues haven't mentioned yet that I think is actually very crucial is have a really good research administrative unit in your department or in your school. I mean, if you don't have a good research administrator, good luck. I mean, it's really crucial. We happen to have a fantastic gentleman who has worked with us for over the last 14 years as well, and he drives things. Everything is done for the investigator. And your budgets are set up. Everything is set up. You just need to work on the science. It really makes all the difference. Research space is important, as many of you mentioned already, as well as office space for research staff and students, and recruiting PhD students from existing PhD programs. Now, what has turned out to be the most effective way in growing our research portfolio? I think leading by example. I have, I think, 3 R01s, 2 training grants. I step into it, show how it's done. And I think leading by example helps to lead the way. If you don't have that type of background, make sure you have an associate chair that can lead by example. I think that's really crucial. Protected research time I mentioned, I think it's essential for your faculty to be successful and for junior faculty to be successful. In particular, PhD training programs, we have a few of them. I think that's really useful as well, so that your starting faculty can bring in their PhD students and can get things done. Research administrative support, I mentioned it already, and of course, the physical space. So what resources are necessary to build a research enterprise and how to acquire them? So have a vision for research that is not too broad. I mean, we had a 10-year review and some of my colleagues well-known in the field said, oh, Jules, you have to go into all these other directions as well. I think that it's hard enough to be successful. Being too broad may not help in your department. So this is more from a departmental perspective. Negotiate with your institute's leadership to get financial support. And as a junior faculty, if you get your grant, before you even submit your grant, negotiate with your chair and negotiate with your institute. Because once you have the grant, people are certainly not so interested anymore. So make certain that you do negotiate with your chair and with your with your school to make certain that you have the infrastructure that you need to be successful if you put in a big grant. Request for research faculty lines that are supported by the Institute, as well as tuition and clinical income. And combine forces with other successful departments, which a number of you mentioned, also is essential. If you don't have the expertise in your department, go elsewhere and make sure that your faculty gets the expertise in other departments so that they are successful. So that's kind of a brief little overview, and I'd like to pass the baton on to Mike Ellis, who's an associate professor in my department, and I think has been very successful taking a not so conventional route that he'll talk to you about. Mike.
Thank you for having me. Hopefully you can see my screen. I'm Mike Ellis, and as Jules said, I'm an associate professor at Northwestern University. And as I was reflecting on the various important things that I've done with the help of the chair, I thought it might be interesting to put it in phases of my progression in my position at Northwestern. So I actually started as a research physical therapist 20 years ago, and over these 19 years have gone through all of the ranks up through associate professor. So I'm going to present 3 different phases and what those most important things were. So back in the early days, what's been mentioned already, the most important part of that phase was seeking advanced research training. And for me, that was pursuing a transitional DPT. And for others on my similar type of track, that might look like a research residency that can provide you structured mentorship and guidance. Another really important thing for me back in those days was being given the opportunity to manage projects. So this was an opportunity that would have let me start becoming more independent, just progressive increase in responsibility. Part of that was also managing student synthesis projects. That's what we call it at Northwestern, student research projects for our doctors in physical therapy. At this phase, publishing was really key. That's kind of an obvious thing, but more importantly, first author publications. This is what it would give me or position me for moving into the postdoctoral phase and specifically seeking out funding. In the early days of mentorship, something that was really important when I look back 20 years ago was attending conferences and meeting my mentors and chairs and other senior faculties network and starting to get my name out there as somebody who is interested in going down the research road. So advancing a little bit farther into that postdoc time and having an interest in gaining a faculty position, granting really became key. And so work with the chair and the PI and the mentor. In order for that to be facilitated, I need things that were mentioned before, like space and equipment and protected time. What Jules had mentioned was core services mentioning grants and compliance administration. I needed access to those types of services to really help with my success. Another thing was engineering support. So some of the work I was doing, really, I needed that expertise. So having that provided for me was really critical. So I happened to use the American Heart Association Postdoctoral Fellowship Award and then the NIH Loan Repayment Program. And the thing that these grants allowed me to do is they really solidified the structured mentorship. So this is where not only the PI that I was working with, which at this time was Jules, but also other collaborators had a real role in my mentorship by virtue of what was required in these programs. So it was really critical. So jumping forward into the next phase, I'm trying to show as a faculty researcher, some of the key things that really I need and that I work with Jules to help with my success is continued protected research time, space, equipment, access, all of that is growing for me. So without the support of the chair, I can't grow either. So so that's quite substantial. Also continued core support. And so I also add in physical therapists. Some of the projects I do, not only do I need engineering, but I also need physical therapists to help. And then finally, it was mentioned graduate students. Now, something that the chair, PIs, more senior faculty can do for us is steer graduate students in our direction. Here's somebody that you might really line up well with, or other faculty members that you might co-mentor graduate students. So that has been very helpful for me too. So the very last bullet I put down at the bottom was what tended to work for me for successful funding was for each of the award mechanisms to really build off of the work that I had done before. Now that was the key line, but all the way along the way, there was also a lot of collaboration with other investigators that was facilitated by the chair and mentor for me to continue building a track record in other interests. So I'm going to stop with that. Hopefully I didn't go too long.
Thank you. This is Dave Brown. So you've heard from 3 faculty chair pairs about how they were able to succeed in building a research enterprise. And I think you see that there's also some variability in how it's done and some of the advice you're getting. So that's wonderful. Before we get into the discussion between our participants, those of you who have joined this and if your questions, I want to bring a perspective. For the last 2 years, I have moved into a dean's position in a School of Health Professions at the University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston. And it's really opened my eyes into what the upper administration is looking for when you go to them and say, we want to build a research enterprise in our department or in our school. And the answers I heard were very surprising to me. So I want to share with you some of the discussions that happen with the CFO, the CEO, the president of universities, the provost, because I think it's important for you to know that when you're looking at building, for example, what happened at Northwestern over many years, when you're looking at developing that trajectory, you're starting with very little. You need to formulate your proposal correctly. So first of all, as Dr. Dewalt actually demonstrated, it could take 5, 10, 15 years to reach that pinnacle, those $5 million, $10 million levels of being in grants. So I wouldn't start out with the argument that if you let me start a research enterprise in my department, I'm going to bring in lots of money, because it will happen, or it may happen, but it'll be years down the line. And the people in the upper administration are kind of looking quarterly, even monthly, at finances. At the very least, they're going to be looking at a year budget. So it's not your strongest argument from the beginning that this will bring in all sorts of riches to the university or to the school. So I would say just hold off on that one. Secondly, and this has been mentioned several times, collaborate outside the department. It's very difficult to build a sustainable group of researchers in a single department. It's much more practical to find collaborators out there in other departments and bring in faculty who can partner with those other faculty in the other departments. Third, I would say it's very important to look at the university's overall priorities, or if you're going to the dean or to the provost, look at the school's priorities and then latch onto those priorities. And when you bring your ideas to those upper level administrators, throw their priorities back at them. Say, oh, I want to help you achieve the priorities that you have here and in research, and we think we can help you here. So look at their priorities and try to meet them with their priorities. Also, if you have institutes or core facilities, if you have facilities that exist already in the university, somewhere in the university, try to bring in faculty who can connect immediately to those core facilities. That way, you're not in a position where you have to initially offer $500,000. It's now up to $1 million startup packages that people are demanding. You can say, we have a core facility that has everything you need, or has most of what you need. We just need to buy you a few other things to fill out the work that you need. And then just a couple more. No one mentioned this. It's odd. Jules, I thought you had mentioned this. You have to bring your teaching faculty along. They have to understand what you're trying to do, or what the whole department. Ideally, you have consensus among all your faculty that some of the money that may be coming in from tuition could be used to leverage and build the research enterprise. If the teaching faculty who are breaking their backs to teach all those courses feel that they're being taken advantage of, that's not a good situation. Plus, it's not a good situation for the new faculty who come in and do research. I could say a lot more about that, but I'll just say, build consensus, make sure your teaching faculty are on board with you. And then the final thing I would say is build incentives for your faculty who do research. If they get a grant, if they're successful in getting a grant, if they're successful in getting awards, whatever, build in some sort of way of giving them a bonus, maybe a temporary bonus for the year, or to pour some money back into their laboratory environment, or to buy them a new piece of equipment, whatever. Build incentives so that these faculty know that if they are successful, it will help them build their enterprise and go forward. So I'll stop there. I hope you all have enough now that there could be a rich discussion at this point. So right now I'll hand it back to Carol and or Stacy to see who's got questions and who would like to start a discussion.
Yeah, so I just want to thank all of our panelists for some really crucial points, I think, for all of us to consider, and just really re-emphasizing and reiterating amongst each other what's important. So we are open for questions. We have about 16 minutes left. Stacy, I saw 1 or 2 questions pop in the chat. I'd also like to thank Stacy Fritz. She's done a fantastic job doing the chat. I did direct message her privately and say, wow, I could learn from her. And so Stacy, do we have any active questions, or if people want to either put their hand up or another way indicate that you have something to say, we can continue.
We do have one question. Sean McQueenie, who's a PhD student at the University of South Carolina, asked about how you find those postdoc opportunities.
Jules, do you want to take that?
Unmute.
You're muted, Jules.
Yeah, I know. We don't. I don't seem to learn this, and that seems others do not either. So, teaching faculty versus research faculty, to comment, I think is an important point that you made, Dave, and I have been trying to get away from that completely by making certain that all my teaching faculty is involved in research 1 or 2 days a week, and it takes time, like the other things that you mentioned. But I think it's important because if you teach and you have an idea of what the latest in science is that you're teaching about, you'll be more effective in teaching in the DPT program as well. So I don't like that two-camp thing that we had when I became chair, and you were there when I took over. And so I don't like that mentality. I think that's divisive and it does not help. So I think that that's something we need to change. And that's something that you call, Dave, the culture. So the culture needs to be such that it's just expected, if you're teaching in a top program, that you are involved in the research enterprise to a certain extent. So, and then I think that will be less of an issue. With regard to postdoc positions, I think my advice would be, and a number of my students have taught me that, is to look in the country of places that do research that you like and contact folks. Don't only go for what is announced and what the positions are. You actually may find better positions by contacting somebody that does, for instance, Parkinson's disease research in a particular lab and say, hey, this is what I've done before. I really like what you do. I think this is what I can bring to the table. Would you have an interest in working with me? And I think that being more proactive, I think, is an excellent way to go, as opposed to just kind of look at by McKell and see what type of positions are out there. So be proactive, I think, can do really good things for you. And we've had a few of our more recent PhD students that have done that actually very, very well. Mm-hmm.
And start that process early. So, you know, current student of mine started talking to people about postdocs already a year and a half ago, and she still has, I believe, a year and a half to go. So she started early, and I think it's smart because they get to know her then.
I wonder if the panel can identify one critical mistake you made, maybe for the chairs, one critical mistake you made that you want to tell people to avoid making. Jules, I know you've never made a mistake. Okay, so go past it.
No, David, this isn't a mistake, but if I would talk about the thing that I find the most challenging is I know that a lot of the, and again, I'm in a medical school, and I personally, our department has had some challenge in getting philanthropy that could begin to support some of the projects that we want to do and really give us some money to work with to build things like pilot funding programs for our students. And so that is something I think that has been the hardest nut for me to crack, is to get into development, make them understand that we are also a department in the medical school. All of the money at the University of Miami seems to go to neurosurgery and surgery, oncology, and all the fancy highly funded departments. And it's been very, very difficult to get those funds, because if I could get those funds, I could do more with giving a little bit more wiggle room or a little bit more resources to bring those junior faculty up and to give some pilot funding from inside the university. So that is something that, again, I think a place to attack that we haven't been as successful as I would like to see us with the development and the external funding.
And it's not just in the School of Medicine. We're in the College of Health Professions, and it's more at the dean's level. We had a dean that was very hands-off, allowed us the independence that you're talking about developing. And now we have a dean that's kind of the other way, is she wants to be very controlling. And so trying to push that the research enterprise is really an important part of our culture is different for her. She doesn't really recognize it. So that can be challenging either way.
Yeah, maybe something else to add. I would say more of a philosophy, and kind of Dave alluded to that more with regard to the time it takes to build the research, is also to not push too hard, because it can backfire. Not only with your superiors, but with your faculty as well. If you push things too hard, you're not always going to get the best results. Things take time, and I think that was a very good remark from Dave, who was at Northwestern when I started my tenure as a chair. And one thing I've learned is, like, I want to do things like yesterday, and it takes time. So having a bit of patience and working on things and understanding the politics, I think, is really important, because I think in the end you'll get more done by having that feel as to how you can, far you can push things and not do things so much that it will backfire.
But I noticed a question from Stacy regarding insight on what new research faculty should ask for during negotiation for a new assistant professor position, and that's what postdocs and PhD students want to know. And you remember when you came on faculty, you knew what you wanted. And I think though your postdocs and your PhD students need to really have an idea in their head, what is the equipment that I need? What is the space required? So that you can negotiate that up front rather than being a little naive and kind of going in, well, of course, when I came on faculty, it was a lot of years ago. And so I was asking for an oscilloscope. There's a lot more things that we could have gotten if I had known to ask for them. So, have it clear in their head what would help them get off the ground quickly.
And this may sound extreme, and I'm sorry if it does, but if you're a postdoc looking for a new faculty position and you know what you need to succeed, without this patient type, without this this piece of equipment, you just can't do your work. And if you go to a place, and if you are interviewing for a job and they say, oh, we don't have that, or we don't have startup money, or we don't have space, walk away. Just walk away. It's not that you are not going to be the one to make it happen if it isn't there. So.
Yeah, I totally agree, Dave. And have your former students or your postdocs encourage them to talk to you. I mean, most of the folks that have left our department consult me afterward and say, Jules, this is the startup funds I was thinking, but do you think that's reasonable? And what about this salary? Is that a reasonable salary? What would you say to that? So encourage them to do that. I think that's really, really helpful. And I completely agree with Dave. If people start to nickel and dime, it's not the right place to go, because you need to have a chair or a person that will make it work for you. Otherwise, it's going to be only worse once you start it. Mm-hmm.
So I have a question. I think I get special privilege as the chair. I heard a lot during the recession that we went through, I don't know how many years ago, that people who are coming out at that time, there weren't a lot of faculty positions in good places to start research careers and good startup packages available. So they were taking second, third tier positions because they weren't available. Do you think that's going to be a challenge in the pandemic? I mean, I know, for example, my institution, they're cutting fellowships out, at least for next year, like good PhD fellowships. And if I had to come up with, fortunately, I don't have a tenure track opening that I need to recruit for, but I don't know that I could come up with a good startup package next year based on my institution's profile. So what would you advise someone coming out in the next few years with what we're dealing with the fallout?
I'm finding that there's a big difference now between the haves and the have-nots. The haves are growing by leaps and bounds with this pandemic. It's actually a little obscene to see it happen. There are some institutions that are doing very well right now. They're getting a lot of donations, a lot of philanthropy, and the NIH is growing in the amount of dollars that they're distributing. Now it has to be in the right area. It has to be post-COVID research or COVID research. But and then there are those that are really floundering, and those that were weak are getting weaker. Those that are strong seem to be getting stronger.
We have a question for Mike Ellis, if we can jump to that.
Okay.
Mike, the question was, do you ever receive any doubts or criticism from funders for not having a PhD?
Yeah, so I had to approach it pretty smartly in the early days. And what I ended up having to do was to educate two primary institutions. One was the American Heart Association, and the other was the NIH. And so I started reading bylaws and federal registers and all that. And when I came to realize that everybody is qualified with the NIH, if I remember correctly, anybody can get an NIH grant right out of their garage if you're an American citizen. So that was the easier institution to convince. The American Heart Association required a doctorate, and they had a list of about 42 different doctorate degrees, but physical therapy was not one of them. So I sat on the phone all day until I finally got a vice president of that organization. And I said, this is what it is. I explained it. I thought that we were on the same page. And he said, so you're a medical doctor? And I said, no, just write doctor of physical therapy and we'll be fine. Put it in your drop-down list and we'll be fine. So for the NIH, all I had to do is actually ask them to put our degree in the drop-down list on the federal forms. And it was as easy as that. They just didn't know about it. So that's kind of the only resistance I had from funders.
Thank you, Mike. We do have one other question, Steve. I think you were talking to Jules when this question came up. He said, can you expand on what you mean by being involved in research? I think this had to do with the teaching faculty and making sure the teaching faculty weren't just teaching faculty.
Okay. So leading by example, is that what we're talking about here? Is that?
It was how you involve your teaching faculty in research.
Yeah. Basically providing time and providing money. So we basically have teaching faculty, all our teaching faculty are involved in research project. This is the synthesis project that Dave is well familiar with, that we still have. That means that every teaching faculty has to foster research with groups of 2 to 4 or 5 DPT students. And basically as part of that, the department gives, literally, right now, $1,500, $2,000 per projects to get the ball rolling, or even more. So we try to foster their work, and we also had to teach our teaching faculty, kind of in the same, say the word, we're teaching twice here, that basically you need to do something that you're interested in, that's already part of your research interest. Don't come up with a project because that's what we want you to do. No, do something that's advantageous to you, and then work with DPT students to help you acquire the data. With that information, you can then go for a small grant, AHA, NIH, etc. So foster it that way. And that's taken some time, but I'm proud to say that pretty much every clinician educator person is doing research, and some of them are pretty much more than 50% research. As a matter of fact, at Northwestern, it's hard for me to open up tenure track positions. Of course, our newer dean expects you to come in with an NIH grant in hand. Well, in our field, as you know, that's not that straightforward. So I have people that in most places should be easily tenure track or tenureable individuals that are not on the tenure track at Northwestern. But regardless, I don't like to make the distinction between teaching and the research. For me, it's a continuum. Folks that do a bit more teaching and less research, and folks that do more research and less teaching. But everybody is involved in both. Mm-hmm.
The one thing I just want to add to the discussion, thank you, Jules, about Mike's challenges perhaps as a DPT without a PhD, is that RIPPT did a survey back in 2017, I believe, in where we did survey professionals that had a DPT and not a PhD, but also had NIH funding or other significant funding. And Debbie, I could be misspeaking, but I'm still assuming that that report might be available on the RIPPT website, but if not, at CSM, we do cover some of that when we talk about a PhD or a residency or postdoc training in one of the CSM sessions. So some of that information RIPPT already looked through, and it's really enlightening.
Yeah, so I've been pushing for that a lot, Carol, as you know, of having DPTs do postdocs. And I mentioned it to the leadership of RIPPT. We got now a training grant reviewed where we have 2 slots for DPTs, and was still a lot of humming and hawing, but we got a 2.5 score. So we may very well get funded this time, and this would help open that direction a lot more, like MDs do. MDs don't do, many of them don't do ever a PhD, and yet they are very successful, and I think we can do the same with our best and brightest DPTs as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jules. So I'm gonna, we do need to wrap up. We got a little bit of a late start, but what I'd like to first off again is thank the panelists as well as Stacy Fritz for just providing us great pearls today, as well as to Jamil, who has worked the technology with us. Debbie, do you want to give the final word tonight? Put you on the spot.
I'm just really thrilled with the presentation, the questions, and the participants. Again, we plan to continue this after combined sections. We know combined sections is so unusual this year, so we would like to resume in March. Everybody here is a potential presenter and panelist. I want to hear from you. I want to hear what you want to talk about. We need to come together as a community and support each other. And this was a fantastic example of exactly what we're looking to do. And I just really, really appreciate the presenters tonight. You did a fantastic job of giving really very good advice, very consistent advice. And thank you very much. So on behalf of the Research-Intensive Programs in Physical Therapy and ACAPT, who we represent a consortium from, I thank you for all you've done tonight. So, so thank you very much. This is going to be recorded and placed on our RIPPT consortium website. So first of all, there are two things. One, your institution can become a member of RIPPT, and you are a member of ACAPT. You can be an individual member of RIPPT. You don't have a vote when it comes to voting for officers, but you can stay informed that way. So we just want people to feel supported in research, and we want to create a national movement to support people in research at this time, and we want it to grow and evolve from this point forward. So thank you so much. It was so great to see so many good friends and new friends tonight. So good night.